Hello, everybody. How are you this week? We are headed to California tomorrow. Yes, we are headed towards the fires. We already had that planned. I go to California about 3 times a year, spend a couple of days in Los Angeles, a couple of days in San Diego, so I can do one-on-one with people. Even though we can do Zoom, sometimes it's nice to see each other in person. So we checked in with the hotel. We're still okay there. We checked in with a few people that said that so many are affected by the fire and they'd really like me to come. So, I'm going to head out, and next time I talk to you, we'll let you know how it goes there. Last week class about boundaries was very important to me. Remember, it's so important to have boundaries for others as well as boundaries for yourself. And as we roll into 2025, with everything that's going on and all the chaos in the country and in the world right now, boundaries are particularly important, especially now that it's a free-for-all on Facebook and whatnot, Instagram and so on. So so make sure that you're keeping your boundaries. But I want to talk to you about alchemy, okay? Understanding spiritual alchemy. So soul alchemy is a holistic practice that involves transforming oneself from within to achieve balance and harmony in life. It's based on the idea that self-knowledge can lead to a life of meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose is what we are all looking for, in ways in which we have a purpose to get up in the day and do something and to give to each other. So it's very important to look at how you can alchemize your soul, your spirit. So spiritual alchemy is an ancient practice with the goal of spiritual transformation, not material. On the other hand, alchemy was an occult science and a forerunner to modern day chemistry. It began during the medieval period and sought to transmute base metals such as lead into gold. So alchemy was practiced by people who wanted to attain material wealth and those who sought a universal elixir for immortality. So it's sort of like that we're trying to create immortality in our soul, even though our souls are already immortal. What we really want to do is make sure that, the golden idea of the pureness of gold, the metal of gold that's so significantly important materialistically, is that in our soul, we turn our soul into gold so that we don't have to come back to the earth plane and deal with hell again, right? So let's talk about some of the stages of alchemy, okay? And see how we can, do self-actualization and spiritual rebirth. That's what really it's all about. Is spiritual alchemy is a rebirth, in essence, living out of your soul in a way in which it's golden, okay? All right, so the first one is calcination, and that is a stage of spiritual alchemy that is known as the black stage. The color black represents chaos, that which is hidden and buried, and the material of the unconscious. It also refers to the idea that the universe emerged from a primitive like black hole, okay? So we're all born with our subconsciouses being ready to be built by the choices that we've made karmically, spiritual choices on where we're going to be born and who we're going to be born to, and what kind of lessons that we're going to learn. So that's the black stage. That's the stage of where our subconscious mind is. I know I harp on this so much, but again, childhood. It is about what you learned as you were growing up and how much of the trauma you have worked through and understand without blame. Because it's not about blaming your parents, they're only people too. But with an understanding that your choice in choosing those parents are part of the process of alchemizing your soul or turning your soul into gold on the earth plane. So you really have to, again, go back to all the lessons that you learned, positive and negative, throughout the course of your childhood. If you have no ability to look at who you really are and how you really behave, you will not be able to find spiritual growth. Emotional growth, mental health, all of these things are so intertwined. A lot of people try to skip the stages of handling themselves emotionally and mentally and just going straight to the spiritual. And those are the people that I call the Fruit Loopers and Wind Chimers, because they think that they're better than everybody else, because somehow they think that something or someone from the other side of the veil is directing them in some form or fashion, and that they've skipped the stage of understanding how their ego was built and what they really think from the inside. So this stage, the calcination stage, this is so important in spiritual alchemy. It's not even funny, and it coincides, of course, with your root chakra, where you feel at home in the world and in your body. So once this is transformed into ash in a spiritual sense, it refers to breaking our worldly attachments, meaning that we are not so attached to the idea of the trappings of what looks like success and or relationships, right? That we let go of toxic people, that we don't keep that kind of energy around for ourselves, that we understand status and wealth and all of that solidify our identity is something that is temporary. Caskets don't have pockets. So, looking at that stuff, it doesn't mean that you can't have a beautiful home. We've talked about that, and making sure your environment and everything about you is aligned so that your soul can be alchemized into gold, because there's part of that that is important in a positive and significant, confident ego. Okay, so that's not what it means, but it just means that you develop a higher level of consciousness so that you're not so attached, and that your spirit is not hindered by attachments. Okay, so that's a stage that's been likened to the dark night of the soul, okay, which is a 6th century poem that describes the journey of the soul in unification with God. And our worldview is then dismantled, and we undergo a kind of existential crisis. Okay, so it's the beginnings of spiritual development. Hopefully, what's happening in the world is causing a lot of people to have that stage, because we can't really observe what's going around in the world right now without having some kind of existential crisis, right? Okay, number 2 is dissolution, okay? And dissolution is the second stage of spiritual alchemy, which is dissolving the ashes into water. In other words, I'm using a metaphor. You're burning up what your karmic profile was. It's going to the ashes, right? And then you're dissolving that in water, and that's interpreted as the symbol which contains the hidden parts of ourselves that we're afraid of and up to now have not been explored. So that takes one step further, right? Like, okay, I had an angry father. Let's just, make something up. I had an angry father. It taught me that anger was about power and control. I became an angry person. I took a look at my childhood energy and stopped being an angry person and recognized where it came from. I forgave my father. And now the hidden part of myself is, how do I free myself from this inauthentic and acquired sense of identity? It's very significant when somebody is a lost child. Meaning, the kid that was the scapegoat child, the kid that was ignored, neglected, or put upon. They don't really have an identity outside of themselves other than how others perceive them because of the way a parent extended that process to them. So that's a very hard one for that type of child. There's also a child that is raised by custodial parents, meaning the parents didn't have much energy on them at all, and they also have self-identification issues. So you have to look at not just the values that you were taught and how it made up some of your personality deficiencies and attributes, okay, and characteristics, but also why did you want to learn some of this stuff? Dig deeper, okay? In chemistry, dissolution refers to dissolving the old materials such as salt dissolved in water. And in Jungian terms, it just means dissolution of the ego, okay? So it symbolizes the reservoir of emotions deep within. You can understand that your childhood was a hot mess, but if you still have tantrums, or you still act out, or you're still defensive, or you still lie, or you still judge yourself by what other people judge of you, then you have not done this second stage at all, okay? So that's important. Stage 3 is separation, okay? In this stage, the pure essence is extracted from the rest of the mixture. As the first 2 stages were associated with fire and water, separation is related to the air, okay? We're talking about elemental energy now, and all of the things that we have that we are exposed to here on the earth plane. And in a spiritual sense, it can be understood that a separation from one's habitual thought process or emotional trigger responses to step back and distinguish our essence from our acquired personality, okay? So remember that what this means is if you're still acting like a spoiled brat, like a 7-year-old, then you haven't done your work and you haven't separated yourself out. You're stuck in those beginning stages. You have not done the separation. It's a very liberating stage because we can free ourselves from resentment towards others in this stage and liberate ourselves from negative emotions, okay? It's a step closer to our essential and our higher self, and the separation occurs when we no longer identify with the character that we've been playing, okay? The character that we've been playing. Some people live their life out of a character, such as the jokester, okay? The kid that was I've got hair in my face, it's driving me crazy. The kid in school, the class clown, the one that maintains that class clown identify as a grown-up and is constantly telling jokes and trying to be getting attention as the class clown, even though they're old or whatnot. That means they haven't done any of their work, right? I mean, it's okay to tell jokes. I mean, I think humor is the greatest, but I'm talking about that person that has to think how to be the class clown to get attention, okay? That means that there is still an attachment to the inner child that's wounded, not the kind of detachment that we need to get out of our old skin. Stage 4, conjunction, which refers to the process of combining the elements from the previous 3 stages. And in a sense, what we see is what is valuable that remains within our authentic self, okay? So let's just take the class clown for a minute. That class clown may be the kindest person in the world, okay? But they are not able to show that authentic self in a way because maybe their kindness is too subtle and quiet and they need that attention. I'm just making stuff up, but you know what I mean, okay? After the first 3 stages of purification by fire, water, and air, the elements are brought together under the earth element. There we go, back into a place where we're, again, working with all the chakras going up and down, 7 stages of human development, what that means, karmic profile, the things that we've been talking about now together at Melinda Plus for several years. We begin a process of embodiment as the spirit begins its process of manifestation. Do you know, in today's world, there are a lot of people that can quote the Bible. There are a lot of people that do a lot of reading. There are a lot of people who make it look like they're all that in a handbag as far as God is concerned. But it has nothing to do with anything outside of us. It doesn't have to do with how well read you are. It doesn't have to do with how well you can quote the Bible. It has nothing to do with how you put on a show of giving to people. It's the quiet undercurrent of energy, of value that you hold for your own self in your spirit that counts. And this is what alchemy is all about. It's a unification of body and soul. That these things come naturally, that kindness comes naturally without thinking, that harmony is achieved in ways that allow masculine, feminine balance, intuition and emotional balance, unification of all of these things. Stage 5, I'm sorry, is fermentation, okay, which is the 5th stage and describes the decay of one's old self and the rebirth of one's true self. And again, this is something that should happen naturally within us. the more refined, authentic self, the one that tells the truth all the time, right? Okay. It's like a rebirth. It's like for those of us who live in Phoenix, like being born out of the ashes. Actually, Phoenix has a vibration of that, but okay, we'll talk about that another time. Okay. But this is a rotting away of our former selves that maybe we've used to protect, to deflect, to devalue, to unconsciously get in our own way. There are people who have great intimacy issues, and they are people who cannot find their authentic self. They have no ability to speak intimately or to be intimate in ways in which they're vulnerable and allowing and moving energy to process these stages of alchemy to find the purest essence of their soul. Lastly, okay, is distillation. And this is when all of the impurities are removed and there's nothing left but the essence. In chemistry, it involves boiling and condensation to separate components and is commonly used in desalinization. Okay, blah. In Jungian terms, though, which is, the psychology piece, it involves the assimilation of any shadow aspects onto our true self. Now, does our shadow self go away necessarily? No, but does our shadow self ride along with us in appropriateness when we understand it and recognize it in a way in which we can use these stages to alchemize it and put it into the perspective of the soul? Absolutely, yes. It marks the point at which the conscious and the unconscious aspects of the self are now brought into harmony. Last but not least is coagulation, and this describes the process of which one's essential self becomes whole. I think Jesus achieved that, period. Yeah, I think Jesus achieved that, period. I think Jesus achieved all 7 stages of alchemy, or perhaps he came in without needing to. I think that is the way that we have to focus, is in Christ consciousness to get there, and to forgive ourselves if it takes time to do these stages over and over again, because this is a process. Okay, it's a process of healing human wounds. We're born in a world that has a lot of different types of stimulation that can cause us to have difficulty in this process. So we have to continue to unify and complete this unification, spirit and matter, body and soul, masculine and feminine, to form a single whole. So in its final stage, one's higher self emerges and it turns into gold. So that's the process that we're hoping that we can get close to before we cross over to the other side, so that there's not a whole lot of work to do on the other side. So I will see you next week. There are books about alchemy that are interesting, but when we do these little classes, I have to give it to you in a nutshell. I mean, there's a lot more to it. So if you're interested in it, please get a book and read about it. And I will report to you back next week about LA, and you have a wonderful week.